Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, joined as always by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado. And today we welcome the co-founder and managing partner of Dogman.com, Kim Grinolds, to the show. It's going to help us preview Oregon State's football game at Washington, which is just over 24 hours away from the time we hit record here on Thursday, November 3rd. It's a Friday night game at 7:30 p.m. at Husky Stadium. You can watch it on ESPN2. I'll start with Angie. Friday night game after a long week. You ready for a late night and then having all day Saturday to watch some football?
Yes, Friday night, I don't mind an occasional Friday night game. So I think this is a good one. I think it's a good time, especially with the Huskies. It'll be a big game for both teams, and I'm excited.
Both squads at 6-2 overall and 3-2 in Pac-12 play. A big game, no doubt. And frankly, the first time we've said that about an Oregon State football game in November in quite some time. Kim, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show. For the listeners who are not familiar with your work at Dogman.com, I don't know how they aren't at this point. Tell them a little bit about yourself, how long you've been covering UW. You can promo the site a little bit.
God, we started back in 1997. Angie, were you even born back in 1997, Angie? Come on now.
I graduated college in 97.
All right. So we started back in 97 with Dave Samick, my business partner, back in the day. And, we were Jim Heckman and Rivals, the Insiders. We were at Fox. And we're with 24/7 Sports. And it's, the rumors of our demise have been greatly exaggerated as we continue to grow and get bigger and bigger. And big thanks to, my two guys, Chris Fetters and Scott Eklund. They're as good as they are in the business. And then being back on the 24/7 network, and you can attest to this, but being back and working with Greg Biggins and Brandon Huffman is awesome. So it's a huge deal. And then we get to work with the coolest publisher in the Pac-12 conference in Angie Machado.
Yeah, pretty much. You nailed it.
Yes.
But you were like the OG Godfather, because seriously, Dogman was like one of the very first sites, out there.
Oh yeah, we were $19.95 a year, and Dave Samick looked at me and told me I was crazy that nobody would pay for recruiting information, and then the checks started coming in, and this little side project quickly turned into the beast that just needed to be fed constantly and daily. And then, back in the day, we used to put out an article every couple of days, and, then it grew to we were doing one a day, and now we're doing
like 1-800 numbers or
we did the 900 numbers
900,
for about a month, and it was shocking how much money we made. It was shocking. I mean, it was just mind-boggling how much money it was being made on that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it's just been, 25 years, Angie, so
crazy.
It's been a long time. I'm still a child, and we're still having fun, and not giving this up anytime soon. It's fun. So just one real quick story. Scott Eklund, when Tyrone Willingham got another year, he threatened to quit. He says, "I'm not doing this anymore. This sucks. It's awful," because it was just so bad. And yeah, I wouldn't let him quit. I said, "We're doing this. If me and Chris are doing this, you're not going anywhere." And I said, "I'm going to still send you checks." So he tried to quit on us, but we wouldn't let him.
we could actually attest to some of that during the Gary Anderson era.
Oh yeah, we've all been through
the dark days.
We've all been through it. Yeah.
Yep.
Moral of the story there is we've got one of the veterans in this business on the podcast today, one of the experts on the Washington Huskies, going to help us break this game down. Let's start with a little Q&A. Let's dive deep into the Huskies, into this game, into the matchup. Kim's thoughts on how the Beavers and Huskies match up here for what, like I said, is really the first time Oregon State has played a big game in the month of November in quite some time. One of the big storylines ahead of this game that I feel like we have to start with has nothing to do with the teams themselves, but the weather. An atmospheric river is forecasted to run through the Pacific Northwest. I've heard about a rain shadow effect, maybe limiting the amount of rain that actually falls in Seattle. But I don't know, Kim, what are your thoughts on, if the rain and the wind do come to fruition as expected, what are your thoughts on how that could impact this game?
Normal. When was the last time there was a Washington Oregon State game where there's been good weather? I've been talking about this for a month. The weather always sucks for Washington and Oregon State. It doesn't matter whether it's up in Washington or down at Oregon State. The weather sucks. It's just the way it is. And it might be a little bit more of an advantage for Oregon State is that I think that they're going to look to run the ball quite a bit, and that's been a weakness of Washington is stopping the run, but a lot of that's had to do with forcing teams to pass the ball and Washington's secondary being so depleted. So the weather it's supposed to rain starting tonight. It's supposed to rain and be just absolutely awful, and then not only the rain, but we're expecting the wind. And if you've never been to Husky Stadium, you get the wind and the rain and the stadium's right on the water. Water's undefeated. It always wins. It always does. I don't care how good a rain gear you have and how much you bundle up, water wins. So the good thing is if you're going to see teams run the football, Angie, that means for a quicker game. So maybe we'll get out of the stadium prior to 2 a.m.
That would be nice, wouldn't it, Carter?
That's what I'm rooting for.
Yeah.
Those 7:30 games, man, I always set the over under at like 3 a.m. for when I wrap up. Yeah, let's run the ball. Let's, short completions, keep the ball in bounds, clean game. Let's get out of here as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Washington's, their strength is on their passing attack with Michael Penix and the wide receivers. So they've not been able to run the ball real effectively all year. So we'll see how that does indeed play out.
Hey, Ken, I have a quick question. How big is this game? I mean, it feels for Oregon State that this is a really big game, kind of a crossroads. Both teams are 6-2, with kind of one team at the winner, maybe projecting themselves into kind of being a contender, and the loser kind of being demoted down to the also rans. Is that the feeling in Seattle, or are you guys just thinking, this is just a normal game?
Well, I think the last game against Cal was a huge game, to take them to 6-2 rather than 5-3, and then going into the Oregon State game with a tough game, because you have to look forward. If they were to not win on Saturday against Oregon State, they travel down to Eugene next week. Yeah. And I think they're going to get boat raced up with the offense that Oregon is running down there. So that's going to be a real tough game to win. Then they come back home for Colorado, which should be a win, but then having to go over to Pullman and play at Washington State. So yeah, this could be, this could turn it where Washington could finish out the season 1-3 or 3-1. So I think this is a real pivotal game for Washington. But the other thing that's kind of unusual was, with Washington with the bye week last week and Oregon State with the bye week this past week, I can't remember two teams having the bye week and then playing together. So a chance for both teams to get healthy as well.
Yeah.
It does kind of mitigate the advantage, when one team comes in off of a bye week, and you always wonder, all right, well, is the team that's been off for a week going to come out like loose and well prepared, or are they going to be tight because they haven't played in 2 weeks? Well, I think what we've seen in the Pac-12 this year, with so many of these bye weeks being constructed around team schedules to limit that advantage or disadvantage, it's been kind of a fun twist to this season. I want to go back to the passing game that you talked about there at the beginning. Washington has been a pass-first team. Michael Penix Jr. is leading the most prolific passing offense in the country right now. I guess let's dive into it. And Kim, I'm curious why it's been so effective. Like what has been the X factor in that offense that's allowed Michael Penix to reach a level that, I mean, it seems to be even higher than what he did at Indiana.
Well, you take a look at what they've been able to do, along the way with Coach DeBoer and then Coach Grubb, the offensive coordinator, and, Kalen DeBoer. Michael Penix had his best year under Kalen DeBoer back at Indiana, and then back at South Dakota State. He won, was it 2 or 3 national championship? It's just a stupid record. I think it was 69-3 back at South Dakota State. So he's been successful everywhere he's gone. And I think it really opened a lot of people's eyes last year with what he did at Fresno State with Jake Haener. I mean, he turned Jake Haener into somebody that people were actually mentioning for a Heisman Trophy. And if he's able to do that with the Jake Haener coming to Washington with, a more experienced Michael Penix. And the running joke is just, if you take a look at Washington's games, their wide receivers just always seem to be so open. There's nobody around them. And is this because of the quality of the wide receivers, or is it, something to do with the offense that they're running? I was talking to the wide receiver coach, Jamarcus Shepard, and he said that he could get Rome Odunze's mom open in this offense. So I don't know. They just seem, like I said, I'm not really 100% convinced that it's as much talent as it is the schemes that they're running, but the wide receivers just always seem to be open. And Magic Mike Penix he's got a little bit of that magic to him, and he just seems to make things happen.
Please don't say that. Magic Mike.
Magic Mike.
And his last name is Penix.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's been going on for a while.
Robert Griffin III with the big Penix energy. I think that'll go down as one of the best commentator quotes of the college football season.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. He's got a rocket arm, but if you really take a look at his motion, he just kind of shoves the ball, but it seems to work effectively. And Washington's got the wide receivers, but just take a look at some of the game film. I mean, they're not just open. They're wide open. So it'll be interesting in the wind and the rain tomorrow night to see how that plays out.
And he's a lefty too, which is always fun to watch. I mean, lefty quarterbacks they only come along every now and then. So I've been impressed with what I've seen from him this year. I will be completely transparent. Coming into the year, I didn't have high expectations. I thought, this is a guy who's been bitten by the injury bug. It looked like he was maybe on the decline from what he had done in that impressive, I believe it was the 2020 season at Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, man, I got to give him credit. He's leading an offense that looks borderline unstoppable at times.
It almost seems like that. Last game against Cal, the first drive, they had to settle for a field goal on the first drive. And every game prior to the Cal game on their first drive, they scored a touchdown. And Michael Penix just looks at times like they're just carving it up, chunks, 7 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, 15 yards. And they're getting big chunks. And, so I don't think anybody really saw this coming. So it makes us wonder what, if he can do this with Jake Haener and Michael Penix, what's the future hold with Sam Heward? So, we'll see next year, whether it's Sam Heward or Dylan Morris, if it's more about talent or if it's more about the scheme that they're running.
Talk a little bit about the running game. I mean, I know that Washington is a pass first offense, but running game, that might be really important on Friday night.
Yeah, before last year, we thought that the running back room was probably the strength of the team, and we found out different very quickly. Where they brought in two transfers and some guys left the program, and the main guy that they seem to be running is Wayne Talapapa, who's he's a senior. He's already graduated. He came in from Virginia, and he's just kind of a workman kind of guy. I wouldn't call him explosive. He just kind of gets the job done. I don't think he's a type of player that anybody has to plan for. Richard Newton, real physical runner, and he seems to be maybe the second or third, alternating with Cam Davis. But Richard Newton is a very, very physical runner, a very dynamic runner, but that physicalness has led to him being injured quite a bit. So we'll see if Richard Newton can get it going. And then Cam Davis seems to be the best blend of all worlds. He's able to run inside, outside, catch the ball, and their pass blocking seems to be pretty well. But I think the run game is, it all has to do with the offensive line. They've got a good offensive line, but they're much better at pass blocking than they are run blocking. Washington could use a dynamic running back, and it'll be interesting to see next year if they address that out of the portal and try to get a dynamic running back.
One look at the stat sheet and, you look at the rushing numbers, and the top two rushers on Washington's team have combined for 14 touchdowns. So that tells me, Washington might be a pass-heavy offense and one of the prolific passing offenses in the country, but it's not shying away from the run necessarily. But I'm curious, too, is that touchdown total inflated by maybe, all right, we get down inside the 5, inside the 10, we're going to punch it in, or are these guys making big plays downfield and breaking loose for big touchdowns?
They've actually struggled in the red zone. I mean, they have struggled near the goal line, and that was one of the things that when they got Wayne Talapapa, that was what he was known for, was being, inside the 5 and being able to score. But they've actually struggled. They've gotten a little bit better at it, running the Wildcat and putting, either Cam Davis or Rich Newton back there, and running the Wildcat, they've been a little bit more successful. But it also doesn't help Michael Penix with the injury history he has. He's pretty good at not taking hits. He's not a mobile quarterback, and he does not run the ball much, and he gets rid of the ball before he gets hit. He's just not taking any chances. So I think that kind of limits Washington's running game as well, where you're not going to see him run past the line of scrimmage much. He'll scramble out, but I'll tell you, he'll get rid of the ball before he passes the line of scrimmage.
Oregon State fans everywhere are smiling hearing that. I think the ghosts of Taylor Green at Boise State and Caleb Williams are haunting them right now. That definitely brings some joy to Beaver fans.
He's athletic and mobile, but like I said, he's going to avoid taking a hit at all costs.
It's kind of like Oregon State quarterbacks. Doesn't want to get hit. So let's talk a little bit defense. I know that the Huskies have a good defense, or the pass rush is one of the nation's best. Oregon State says that they have a trio of edge rushers that might be the best they've seen all year. Is this athleticism? Is this scheme? What makes the Huskies so potent in pass protection?
Well, experience, I think experience is number one. With Jeremiah Martin, he's a transfer from Texas A&M, and he's kind of had a coming out party this year where he's playing real well. It just sometimes takes a little bit of time for guys coming from high school into college for that switch to click, and it's definitely switched from Jeremiah Martin. And on the other side, they have Braylon Trice. We're hearing rumors of, he may be a little bit dinged. So we'll see if Braylon Trice is able to do it, but he's been in the program a long time. And then ZTF, Zion Tupuola-Fatui, he just seems to have a knack for getting after the quarterback. He was a preseason All-American in certain services. So we'll see what he can do. And then you've also got Sidell Smalls, who's, he's a 5-star rated kid out of Kennedy High School. And, he's not getting as much playing time, but they've got some dynamic guys on the edges, which, makes it a little bit more surprising that they've been as successful as they have, because their interior pass rush isn't there. And if you want to have a good pass rush, I think the push up the middle is important, where Washington, they don't have Vita Vea anymore. They don't have Greg Gaines anymore. They don't have Elijah Qualls anymore. They don't have that run stuffer inside that can push that pocket. So if they can stop those guys on the edges, you're not going to get the pressure up the middle.
We can go on and on about how Oregon State's high-end secondary matches up against Washington's high-end passing game, and how much that matchup could play a big factor in determining this game. But I love the idea of watching this matchup between Washington's edge rushers and Oregon State's offensive line, which has traditionally been pretty good at blocking in both the run and pass games. And Ben Gulbranson back there, who has been, sometimes statuesque at quarterback for Oregon State. He took the 4 sacks against Stanford. I think he's getting better in that area, but man, you look at that trio of edge rushers that Oregon State says that it hasn't seen anything like it this year. And, I think Oregon State has to be concerned about its ability to keep those guys in check. On the back end of the Washington defense, it feels really weird to talk about that being maybe a weakness for the Huskies, but, the Huskies have seemed uncharacteristically porous on the back end. I'm curious what has held them back in that area that has been a strength of theirs for so long.
Well, you hate to point the finger to the previous guy, but that's what coaches do, who brought these guys in. But, I'll put it right at the feet of Jimmy Lake. Jimmy's one of the best defensive back coaches in college football. He was. But then he ascended to defensive coordinator and head coach. And it just seemed like when he got elevated to defensive coordinator and head coach that his recruitment changed. And when you take a look at the roster and the guys that they've got starting back there now, at one corner, you have a former walk-on, Mish Powell. And on the other, you have a transfer from a smaller school in Jordan Perryman. And then at safety, you have a former wide receiver. Not exactly what we're used to seeing at Washington over the years, but it just seems like, they've been hurt a lot this year. The starting 5 defensive backs for the Kent State game, the last game against Cal was the first time all 5 had been on the field at the same time since the first half of the Kent State game. They just don't have the bodies. They don't have the experience. There's a lot of youth back there. And I just don't think that they have the talent that they've had in the past. And then you throw in a new defensive scheme, and the defense hasn't made as much of a progression from last year as the offense has. The offense is night and day different than last year, but the defense has definitely not made the step forward that the offense has.
Looking at the home field, what is your expectation for the crowd on Friday night?
Small. It's a Friday night game. Traffic's going to be a disaster. Tonight, weather's going to be a disaster. I think that's going to turn a lot of people off. Parking is going to be difficult because it's a Friday night game, and University of Washington's, that's a big employer. So there's a lot of employee parking there. Parking's going to be difficult, as you got the emails explaining that. I think we're parking in Everett, Carter. So
Yeah.
I think we're parking in
Hey,
Everett.
I printed my backup parking pass. So much for the S1 pass.
Yeah, and S1 is a ways away, but I think the weather's going to scare some people away. I think the Friday night game is going to scare some people away. Just the commutes and tailgating when you put up your tent or whatever it is to do the tailgating in, and you got 45-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, I'm not expecting a big crowd. I'm really not.
Okay.
It's a shame, really, because I feel like these are 2 really good teams going at it in an environment that is always hostile at Husky Stadium. No, I think Oregon State fans are, have a lot of bad memories about Oregon State games up there with just how loud it gets. And you mentioned, I mean, the wind whirling in that place is unlike anything you're going to find around the Pac-12. It's a very unique home field advantage, but I do think it's a shame that this game gets pushed to Friday night in poor weather that might turn some people away, because this does have the feeling of a game that should be sold out.
You got to come down to the sidelines at some point, either before the game or in the fourth quarter. You got to come down and experience the elements. I mean, get the full Seattle, Husky welcome to Seattle, welcome to Husky football. You got to experience it all.
So I
remember being a student and driving up there, and that was back when that one end zone was just a few bleachers.
Yeah.
Oh God, it was horrible. Wind, rain, all the above.
Yeah, if I have a whole backpack for cold weather and rain. So I learned a long time ago, there's nothing worse than being cold and wet in Husky Stadium. And I'm telling you, when it's raining and the wind kicks up off the water and it's just coming at you sideways, it's not coming down, it's coming at you, So it'll be interesting.
At least Oregon State and Washington, I mean, it's not like they're immune from having bad weather, though. It's not like Arizona State's coming up and going to be crying about it.
No,
it is what it is.
It
makes you tougher.
It's football. That's
right.
That's like in basketball recruiting. The guys talk about the basketball recruits. Would they tell you it rains in Seattle? And the one guy said, "Well, we play inside." So yeah.
But the interesting one is going to be watching USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten and having to go, play Rutgers or something in November. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. UCLA softball in Ames, Iowa.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, the softball team's playing in the
for you guys.
Midwest, in March when there's snow on the ground. That's going to go over real well. So this ain't Brentwood. So.
Exactly.
So Kim, is that press box at Husky Stadium still open air? Because when I was up there in 2020, they pulled the garage doors up and everything, and all the wind and stuff is whipping. I remember it being just absolutely frigid. Like my fingers were numb trying to type. Do they still do that, or do they leave the windows down at all?
I'm not up there. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I mean, just for those who've never been, they are actual garage doors on garage door openers. They're glass, and so they're closed before the game, and they typically come by and push the garage door opener button and they open up. So when I get up there, after the game, on a game like tomorrow, they'll typically be closed, but they leave them open quite a bit too. But that wind kicks up and it blows everything all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, that 2020 season, all those Pac-12 games are being played late November, early December, and I think Oregon, it was like the second game for Oregon State. I want to say it was like the very end of November, right before Thanksgiving, something like that. It was like 35 degrees at game time, like 8 p.m.
Carter,
The rain's coming down sideways.
I have 6 electric hand warmers in my bag. I'll loan you one. Okay.
Much appreciated. I'm coming so prepared. I'm packing all of the layers.
Yeah.
For Friday's game.
Good move.
Let's talk a little bigger picture stuff.
I'm doing a coin toss
Angie.
at the local high school on Friday night. Yeah, so that's going to be fun too, because I'll have to walk out in the middle of the field, do a quick coin toss, and
you'll be okay, Angie. You won't melt. You'll be fine.
I don't know. I'm getting old.
She's gonna smack me when she sees me.
Honorary coin toss at Sherwood High School. I love it.
Right.
That's awesome stuff.
There we go.
I mean, they had Adley Rutschman there last week, so I don't know if he did
all
the
of the
coin toss,
local celebrities coming up for this month.
Exactly. Not saying a whole lot.
There we
Angie
go.
Machado, Adley Rutschman.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
Somebody's making a hell of a lot more money than the other two.
BeaverBlitz is lucrative, I tell you. A couple of bigger picture questions for you, Kim, regarding the Washington football program. Obviously, year one under Kalen DeBoer. You mentioned the improvements that Washington has made on the offensive side under his direction. I think pretty much everybody who saw this thing unfold from the outside expected that. Kalen DeBoer, obviously being an offensive-minded coach, the things he did at Fresno State were impressive. Just the offense we talked about, but everything else. How much of a 180 has this program done under his direction? Because it, again, from an outsider's perspective, was pretty down there for a little while under Jimmy Lake.
Well, when Chris Peterson came in, Chris totally changed the culture at Washington. You've got to go from what Tyrone Willingham, is to attempt to destroy the program, and you had guys that shouldn't have been playing in the Pac-12, guys who just lost their passion for football. And when Steve Sarkisian came in, he had to turn a lot of things around, and he had to do it quickly. And one of the things with Sark was to turn it around quickly was to bring in a lot of guys that were academic risks. And a lot of them were very, very good players. John Ross, Vita Vea, Azim Victor, all these guys are all conference type players, but they had grade issues, and they all pretty much thrived under the academic system. But then when they brought in Chris Peterson and his Built for Life, if you've never listened to Chris Peterson talk, he's amazing. And he's always, football is plan B, your academics and who you are plan A, because there's so few people who make it. So, creating the culture at Washington was such a big deal in his Built for Life program. And it's an amazing program. And Chris Peterson is still involved in the football program. But, when they handed the program off to Jimmy Lake, I think most anticipated that stuff would continue. And it's just mind blowing that you have a Hall of Fame coach who mentored you through all of this stuff and all of this success, and you get named the head coach. You never pick up the phone once and talk to him, not once, which just blows my mind. And, Jimmy just changed when he went from defensive back coach to defensive coordinator to head coach, and it didn't end well. And I think some of the things that Chris Peterson instilled into the program got, Jimmy talked about it, doing the same stuff, but I think that the culture really took a slide back. And then bringing in Kalen DeBoer, he's all on board. I mean, he talks to Chris Peterson regularly, and this is not an outlaw program. I mean, academics and character are really, really important. And Chris Peterson talked about, I don't want players that I just like on Saturday and hate the other 6 days of the week. I've got to like them 7 days a week. And Kalen DeBoer has pretty much been on board with that. And I don't know if you've really listened to him much or much of his coaching staff, but they just all seem to be that grind Midwest kind of work ethic. They just grind things out. They're not flashy, and when they talk to us, they're not flashy coaches out there. They're not all looking for their next job. They just seem to be that Midwest grind them down type.
It sounds a lot like, Coach Smith too. Coach Smith learned a ton from Chris Peterson. And,
oh yeah.
Oregon State was in a horrible culture after Gary Anderson. I mean, same kind of things, Kim. I mean, I remember talking to players and parents, and the kids had just lost their love of football. They didn't even want to play anymore. And so when Jonathan took over and building kind of the same, same system. But what do you think is the ceiling for this year's team?
The ceiling, I actually think that they have outkicked their coverage this year. I don't think anybody expected the offense to be as good as it is. I don't think anybody expected the defense to be as poor as it is. At 6-2, I think that they can beat Oregon State. I don't think that they will beat Oregon. That will put them at 7-3. They will beat Colorado. That would put them at 8-3. And Washington State's game is going to be tough. So we'll see. So they could go 3-1 the rest of the season. They could go 1-3. So we'll see. And I think a lot of that has to do with how well the defense performs, because I think the offense is going to be tough to stop.
Yeah, this game will, I think, set the tone for both squads the rest of the way. Oregon State's schedule might be a little more favorable with Cal and ASU. Those are no walkovers. Obviously, Arizona State beat Washington, but this does feel like, all right, we're here for the stretch run. Whoever wins this game might take off and get a few down the stretch. It feels like a game that's going to decide, after those top four, who's next in line, who's going to get into that, the higher seeded bowls, as opposed to, going down to LA or to El Paso,
right?
As many have projected for Oregon State, that trip to El Paso. So
sounds like
you can tell I'm fired up about that.
Yeah.
But you can go across the border to Juarez.
Get shot.
Brilliant.
Go over to Juarez to get some cheap meds and dental work. I've been around too long, haven't I?
You and me both.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we've got on the rundown for you, Kim. If you want to throw some stuff back our way, we can answer a few questions for Oregon State. Otherwise, we'll let you get out of here.
Oh, no, I definitely have some questions for some Husky football fans. And, the big thing is Jonathan Smith was up here. I mean, when he was at Oregon State, he was a Husky killer. I think he
set the record, 469 yards passing. That's the record for passing.
Yeah, no, he tore it up. And when he was the offensive coordinator here, I always say fans need to have a piñata, and Jonathan was a great piñata until he left. And then everybody's going, God, I wish we had Jonathan Smith back. And he signed a big contract extension down at Oregon State. And it's funny because I see him being mentioned for jobs. I don't see him ever leaving Oregon State. Why would he? Do you?
Yeah, no.
No, that's my exact take. And, I can't remember who it was, maybe Stuart Mandel, I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, that listed him as a potential candidate for the Arizona State job. And I said, what? Why would he ever take another job in the Pac-12 that's not maybe named like USC or something like that? I mean, the big thing for me is, Jonathan Smith took this program to such great heights as a player. He's responsible for the greatest season in Oregon State football history. Don't you think he wants to see that through as a coach too? I mean, he's seen the heights that he can take this program to. I have no concerns about him ever leaving until he does that a few times as a coach too. A couple of 10-win seasons, he's going to want to see that same success. And even then, as an Oregon State lifer, is this the kind of guy who might just say, hey, this is my place, this is where I want to be? Somebody who could coach in the same place for 30 years, like some of the greats have. I don't see him ever leaving. I think, Angie, you're kind of on the same page there.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, Kim, you and the Husky fans know Jonathan Smith is not some flashy ego dude. I mean, if he never had to talk to the media, he'd be I think thrilled to death. He's just not that guy. He has a young family. And it's funny because you hear fans in the Pac-12. I mean, granted, there's better weather and different, but Corvallis isn't like a bad gig. I mean, it's lay low and you raise your family and your 5-minute drive to your work every day. I mean, it fits him so well.
Well, tell me if I'm wrong on this, because I don't think I am, as well as I know Jonathan, but Jonathan's not about Jonathan as much. He's a family man. And if you take a look at him with his wife, and how many kids does he have?
They have 3. And the oldest one is my youngest's age. So he's, I think, a freshman in high school right now, and into sports. I mean, all the kids are into sports. They're into, all kinds of, I mean, yeah,
He's not going to uproot his family. He's got a good gig there. And uprooting your family as a coach, when you talk to Kalen DeBoer, when he got hired and somebody asked him about possibly taking another job, he goes, yeah, you ask my kids, they're done with moving. Yeah. It's uprooting. And if Jonathan just seems like, hey, I'm here, I'm making money, my family's happy, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's he making now, Carter? What was Jonathan's new contract?
A couple million? Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I want to say like 3.5.
3.5 to 4 million in Corvallis.
Yeah. Can you afford a house making that kind of salary in Corvallis?
Yeah, he has a really nice house, by the way. I've seen pictures. It's very nice.
Yeah.
4 million, 3.5, 4 million goes a lot further in Corvallis than it does LA or even Phoenix.
Yeah, no, it kind of cracks me up when we see that. But I think the other interesting guy a couple of guys, I think I like your coordinators a lot. Tell me a little bit about Brian Lindgren as a coordinator. I think that he just kind of flies under the radar.
He's the pinata this year.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he totally is.
He is Oregon State's pinata this year. Yeah.
Which he hasn't been in the past. I think, for years, we talked about Brian Lindgren as being one of the 2 or 3
but he
coaches
has
on this.
been a couple times. I mean, last year, Washington State,
yeah, that's true.
he just starts abandoning the run and trying to get too fancy.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. There have been times where Brian Lindgren has, received some flack for his play calling. And, I think you look at what he's done as a talent developer, some of the game planning he does, and he's right up there with some of the best offensive coordinators out west, in my opinion, in that realm. But there have been times where Angie and I are left scratching our heads on Sundays saying the run was working perfectly fine for 2 quarters, and then you abandoned it and went to this air raid style offense almost, and like, things stalled and Oregon State didn't score for 20 minutes. Like, where was the run game? It's that kind of stuff that has left some Oregon State fans not entirely thrilled with play calling this year.
My biggest criticism,
I think more than not, though, Angie, we both agree that Brian Lindgren is like a pretty high-end coordinator.
Yeah, you know what? If I had one complaint, though, with Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren combined, is their lack of being able to recruit a top-end quarterback. I mean, These are 2 guys. Jonathan Smith played the position. He's coached at some really good schools. Has a great pedigree. And Oregon State, this is the first year that Oregon State actually has recruited and has a commitment from a top-level quarterback. They've struggled, for 4 years now. And so that, there's no depth at quarterback really to speak of. I mean, Chance Nolan's down and you're left with Ben Goldbranson, who now will be in his, 4th start?
4th start in a row, yeah.
So,
is it Brian Lindgren's offense or is it Jonathan Smith's
offense? I think it's Brian Lindgren's. And I do think, Carter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when Oregon State had that little skid there, when they threw, 8 interceptions or something crazy in 2 game span. Yep. Jonathan did, he made some comments about needing to look at the play call, kind of evaluate what they were doing. I think there was a heart-to-heart there between the 2 of them.
He didn't throw anybody under the bus, but, talking with him after the Utah game, it was very clear that, he was not happy with the way that game was coached. And, he took some of the blame himself, but, he referred to it as a coach's thing. He was talking about the coaches need to do better on game days and put the players in situations to be more successful. And particularly with regards to the offense, I think a lot of that was directed towards Brian Lindgren and the running game as well. Damian Martinez started to kind of break through a little bit there in the middle part of the season. And it was very clear that Jonathan Smith wanted Damian Martinez to touch the ball a lot more than he was. It almost seemed like a point of kind of a point of tension between Smith and some of the offensive coaches there. Now it's a non-issue. Damian Martinez seems to be the featured back in this offense, but there were a couple of weeks there where it seemed like maybe there was some butting of heads on the coaching staff.
Now, Trent, I was going to say, now talking about defensive coordinator, Trent Bray.
Yeah, Trent Bray, yeah.
I mean, Kim, you probably remember, I mean, Trent played up in Pullman as a high school student. His dad, Craig Bray, was Oregon State under Dennis Erickson. It was at ASU, long time. But this was a defense that was one of the worst in the country. And he's got them playing better than 50th ranked now, pretty much overall.
Which one of those 2, if you were to say Trent Bray or Brian Lindgren, which one's a head coach first?
Trent Bray.
Trent Bray.
Wow.
Yeah. If you asked me last year, I would have said Lindgren, but I just think the leadership that we have seen from Bray in the span of now almost exactly a year in this role, because he was named the interim around this time last year, the leadership and I mean his ability to scheme and show that kind of improvement on a year-over-year basis. I mean, like Angie said, Oregon State was one of the worst defenses in college football at this point last year, and now they're one of the best defenses in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and Trent has he is totally he has the respect of his not only the defensive players, but he's the guy that's out there, during warmups, the offensive guys. He knows all the offensive guys, and he's shaking their hands and talking to them. Very, very top end coach.
You guys are familiar with the secondary at Oregon State. If you've got Michael Penix and it's 3rd and 10, how comfortable are you on 3rd down with Michael Penix back there against the Oregon State secondary?
Pretty confident.
Yeah.
Oregon State secondary is probably, Carter, I would say best in the pack and one of the top in the country.
I think it's a top 10 group in the country. The passing yards per game number, it doesn't back that up. I think the Beavers are still like in the bottom half of the country in passing yards allowed per game, or right around the middle of the pack there. But you look at the pass defense numbers, it's the pass deflections and the interceptions, and Oregon State's doing that at a rate that nobody in the Pac-12 is even close to right now. The Beavers only have 10 interceptions, but I mean, there's
48.
There was a 3-game stretch in there where they didn't have one, and it felt kind of uncharacteristic for this group. But I mean, Jaden Grant's got 3 picks. Ryan Cooper Jr.'s got 3 picks. Rajon Wright, I think, has 2. I mean, we go down the list. Alex Austin just had a pick 6 last week. Like, it's not just 1 or 2 guys that are doing it. And I think that's what makes this group so good. And that's why I think Angie says she has confidence in a 3rd and 10 against Michael Penix, because if Penix wants to go to one side of the field, he's got an all-conference corner that he's thrown against. If he goes to the other side, there's another all-conference corner. If he wants to go over the top, there's 2 all-conference safeties. And then you throw in probably an all-conference nickel as a 5th guy there. And I mean, it's there are no breaks for opposing offenses when you're going up against that secondary.
And this is what makes the game so intriguing, with Washington's offense, being their strength, and Oregon State's defense, strength against strength. That's why I think that this game is so intriguing. And then throw the weather in. Yeah. So I think that's going to make it real interesting. But I think also, as you said, when you take a look at the numbers, I think passing yardage numbers can be skewed when you're always ahead. When you're playing ahead and forcing teams to throw the ball, of course, there's going to be more passing yards. So those numbers can get skewed a little bit. But, again, Washington's weakness on their running game going against Oregon State's, defensive front. Tell me a little bit about that defensive front.
It's much improved, that's for sure. We go back to the improvements that Trent Bray has made on the defense, and I think a lot of it starts up front. Just a more aggressive scheme. The defensive line has been like, Angie, I don't think we've even talked about the defensive line this year, which is so
and
weird
that's been a huge point of contention. I think that was one of our biggest weaknesses. I still don't think it's a strength necessarily, but they're better.
Well, I saw a Pro Football Focus metric earlier today that Oregon State has like one of the highest graded run defenses west of the Mississippi right now. Yeah, we would not have said that last year or the first 4 years of Jonathan Smith's tenure.
And I like, and this goes back to Trent Bray, the scheming has been able to maybe mask some deficiencies in that pass rush, because you'll see outside linebackers in the pass rush, you'll see safeties coming, you'll see corner blitzes. So Oregon State gets really creative in how they rush the passer.
Yeah, if you take a look at the stats, I think Washington's run defense is rated higher than it should be, and that's because they've been playing ahead for so often. And why would you run the ball when you can throw the ball, against Washington's secondary? But at the end of the day, it still comes down to, college football has changed so much. Instead of the game being about stopping the other guy, it's more about outscoring the other guy. And when you take a look at Oregon State's offense, because I think Washington's going to score regardless with their offense, it's just that dynamic. And will Oregon State's offense be able to put up the numbers? Tell us people a little bit about Oregon State's offense.
It's going to have to rely on the run game, I think. You know, a third-year freshman quarterback going into a hostile environment in the weather. You know, without Luke Musgrave at tight end, we haven't really talked about that being much of a factor, but this feels like a Luke Musgrave kind of game, you know, where maybe you can't air it out 30 yards downfield because the wind's a factor and it's going to be hard for your receivers to hold on to the ball. This feels like a tight end kind of game, right? And so, I mean, maybe we see some true freshman Jack Velling out of Seattle, a Seattle native himself. You know, he's kind of broken out this season, but it does feel like a game where Oregon State has to dominate the point of attack, get some yards at the line of scrimmage, which it has shown this year, and particularly in the last couple of weeks, it's as capable of doing that as it has been in years past.
Yeah, it would be, I'd like to see this game in September rather than November.
Yeah.
I'd like, you know, where the outside elements wouldn't impact. I think it would be a hell of a bowl game.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe when Washington goes to the Big Ten, they can play Oregon State in a bowl game. in
the Rose Bowl?
In San Diego. How's that sound?
Let's move to Pasadena.
Yeah. Let's go down there, because I'm sure what you sold your house for in Corvallis, you would be able to upgrade down in Pasadena. So, all right. Anything else for me, guys?
I think we're good. We've got some Oregon State stuff to talk about too, so we'll let you bounce. I can send the audio over to you. You can chop it up and use it on Dogman as you wish. But Kim, thanks for joining us. I'll definitely be looking for you and Chris and everyone else at the Dogman staff on the sidelines and in the press box tomorrow.
I will be there. Scott Eklund will be there. Chris Fetters will be there. We will have an intern there, and Monica Samick will be on the sidelines. Moni will be there. So we usually come up to the press box beforehand, grab a bite to eat before we go down into the shower, you know, so so we'll do that. But any help you guys need, we're there for you. And, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to Moni if you have some specific photo needs. She's awesome.
She's best.
All right.
Awesome. We appreciate it, Kim.
Carter, how much do you have to pay Angie to work for her? Because she's so cool. How much do you pay her to work? Fetters paid us for 3 years before we actually made him stop. How much do you pay Angie? Because that's how you guys really make the money, having guys.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. People knocking down the door to work at BeaverBlitz.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, just forward this stuff to Chris Fetters, all of it, and he'll get it up. Okay.
Awesome. We appreciate it, Kim. Thanks for
Thank
stopping
you.
by.
Come down on the sidelines. Come down on the sidelines. Come
I will with my raincoat, rain pants, poncho, boots,
shorts, flip flops. You'll be fine. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kim. That's Kim Grinolds of dogman.com. Just great stuff as always from the 24/7 sports experts. Another advertisement for 24/7 sports is, you know, all of the great insight and analysis you get with a BeaverBlitz.com subscription. You can go read Kim's stuff. You can go listen to Chris Fetters on the Dogman podcast.
Read their message boards. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, and like he said, then you also add in the extra bonus of Biggins and Huffman with recruiting, best in the business, and Moni works for 24/7 as well, and is amazing resource for me behind the scenes. So it's a great team.
All right, let's shift our gears to Oregon State specifically, because it's a short week. We're here recording on Thursday, and we've got a game in almost 24 hours. But that didn't slow things down in Corvallis one bit this week. We still had a Jonathan Smith press conference on Monday. Still talked to some coaches and players on Tuesday, and we gained a lot of insight. So let's start with the Monday stuff, Angie. A couple of injury notes first to touch on. That's always one of the big points of emphasis throughout the week. You want to run through this, or here? I'll kick it off with this. Offensive lineman Marco Brewer is out for the year. He sustained an injury against Colorado. We didn't really see this coming. I don't even remember him leaving the game, really.
He'd been kind of, I mean, I know he's been battling some things just because he's been kind of in and out. But I don't know what the injury was that he sustained, but guessing lower leg. Because
it'll go down as undisclosed.
But
yeah. Alton Julian also out for the year. Angie, we actually reported that last month and finally got the confirmation from Smith himself on.
I like it when other media like runs it like it's new news. Like, welcome to the party. Everett Hayes, Joe Golden may return this week, and then Chance Nolan has been cleared. We will not see him as the starter this week, but are you surprised that Chance is back? Is this what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not surprised, because if he was in the concussion protocol for like a fourth straight week, I would have been pretty concerned. I do think, we haven't gotten the specific word from Smith on concussion / neck strain, but like it was originally announced as a neck strain, and then he was in the protocol. So I have a feeling there were two things going on there. It was just a matter of getting cleared from both of them. So it's possible that he wasn't in protocol for 3.5 weeks. It's possible that, that was like a 1.5, and then, oh yeah, he's got this neck injury.
Which, let me tell you, I slept wrong last night. Holy crap.
Okay, I did the same thing. No, I'm sitting here too.
I can't look. Right. I can't look left. It's bad. I'm like doused in essential oils. I even took a leave this morning. Getting old is stupid. Or playing football. Okay. Yeah,
playing football will do it to you for sure. But on the topic of the quarterback, so Chance was limited in practice on Monday and Tuesday. He will not get the start this week. He will not return to the lineup. Jonathan Smith said on John Canzano's radio show on Tuesday that Ben Gulbranson will get his fourth consecutive start. So it will be the third-year freshman. It will be the redshirt freshman graduate, Ben Gulbranson, standing back there under center in the pocket for Oregon State. I said this earlier when we were talking to Kim, Angie, that it feels like a game where Ben's kind of thrown to the wolves as he was against Utah. The secondary is not as good that he's facing, but that atmosphere, that environment, the weather, it just feels like a tough spot for a guy who doesn't have a ton of experience.
Yeah, but he's not green. So that's, that Utah game was tough. To come into that one. I don't think I think he's been around the program. I don't even think of him as a newbie anymore. I kind of look at him. This is his fourth start. He's got, some things under his belt. I do think it was, I think that Colorado game and a bye week were good for him to kind of build some confidence. But I'm not really concerned about it because Chance had his other issues. So, Chance, it's not like I wouldn't say that anybody had necessarily, especially when you look at Carter, we kind of knew Chance was going to be the starter, but when Smith and company decided to make that quarterback battle lead on, they did have some questions because not one of them just kind of won the job outright with all their skills.
Completely agree. PM in the chat, I just threw this up on the YouTube screen if you're watching us live on YouTube. PM says this feels like the end of the Nolan era unless Gulbranson gets hurt. If Ben goes up there and he wins this game and he improves to 4-0 as a starter, you're probably right. Because, there's obviously the injury piece. Brian Lindgren said he doesn't believe in quarterbacks losing their job due to injury. So what? Take that for what it's worth. What Chance Nolan did before he got hurt was throw 6 picks in 5 quarters of football.
Yeah.
It's not like he was playing out of this world before he got hurt too. So, there's something to be said about game manager quarterbacks. There's a reason Tristan Gebbia won the job 2 years ago in that COVID season. Game manager type football player. Gulbranson's undefeated as a starter, and if he keeps that going, he might just be the guy the rest of the way.
Yep, I agree.
Speaking of Brian Lindgren, he also, as Angie was talking about earlier, said this is the best pass rush Oregon State has seen and maybe will see this year up at UW. So the key there, as Lindgren said, stay on schedule, no third and longs, keep it to third and short. Let's pick up a few yards on first, few yards on second, and stay out of those obvious passing situations because Washington does have an ability to get home just sending 3 or 4 guys, which that poses all sorts of problems because if you can drop guys into coverage and still get pressure, good luck.
Yeah, I just think this is going to be a game. The weather is going to dictate a lot. So, dink and dunks, run game. Like you said, pick up the chunk, 2, 3, 4 yards a play and stay out of those deep, long passes.
Ben Branson said that he is getting more and more comfortable every week. The game's continuing to slow down for him, which is exactly what you want to hear from your new starting quarterback, somebody who is still gaining experience. Another player who spoke during the week is defensive lineman Isaac Hodgins, who was asked if he might come back next year for, what would that be, a sixth or it'd be a sixth year for him, right?
Yeah.
Non-committal, said, he's got a family now. It's not just him going to decide what's best for him. And then Trent Bray rounded out the interviews and talked a little bit about the weather, which it was interesting to gain the perspective on that from a defensive coach, because Bray said, if it's wet, if it's windy, it doesn't really affect us that much on defense. It's more of an offensive thing. You just got to be ready to take the ball away if it comes loose.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that's a great observation. This isn't going to, affecting, they just have to be ready for either balls slipping out of hands, any of that. And maybe
Bray
they try
also,
to punch some.
Yeah, Bray also highlighted Michael Penix and said really what makes him the most dangerous is the supporting cast.
Yeah.
Coaches will always hype up their opponent, but I think he's got a point. Penix has two great receivers that he targets more than the others. And the run game hasn't been particularly effective, but like I said earlier, their top two guys have combined for 14 touchdowns, so they're doing something right. Pretty solid offensive line as well, a veteran group. And yeah, you put all those pieces together, and that's exactly why Washington has such a potent passing attack. We're going to go overtime for sure today. We're gonna cross the hour threshold in just a minute, but we still have to hit on keys to the game. Angie, this is one of our weekly segments, and I'm going to let you start things off with the offense.
And I typed them in for you, so look at that.
Wow, that helps so much.
I did.
So I don't have to do it.
You don't have to do it, and we'll remember when we recap on Sunday. My key to the game for offense is run the ball, and I just think the weather is going to dictate so much. Keep the ball on the ground. Again, ball security is going to be huge for these running backs. They're going to have to be able to hold on to it, but I just think that's going to be huge with the weather, and I think Kim might be overlooking. I heard him say he expects the Huskies to win. We didn't get his final score, but I think the weather is going to be a bigger factor in this game than some people are thinking, especially since Washington's strength on offense is passing.
The wind more than the rain, in my opinion, just based off of, the recent forecasts that I have seen suggesting that most of the rain might be limited to the mountains and the hills, and that Seattle itself might not actually get very much rain at all. Insane rain shadow effect there at play. And if that is true, the weather might not be as huge of a factor in this game as we originally thought. Running the ball, regardless of what the weather is, I think that's a great key, because Oregon State, going up against a great pass rush, is going to have to maintain balance and is going to have to move the ball on the ground. I think, my key to the game offensively for Oregon State, the offensive line just has to protect Ben Branson, and he's got to be able to move around a little bit, because with that trio of edge rushers and Washington being 12th nationally, 12th in the nation in sacks, it's unfortunate that Oregon State has to overcome that in order to take advantage of a secondary that's really down, because if Branson gets the ball out of the pocket quickly and the receivers are able to get open, and they could have a field day downfield. Yeah. This is not the Washington secondaries of past. There is a lot of opportunity for Oregon State to move the ball through the air. But that's not going to happen if Branson keeps getting sacked, or if he's getting pressured and he has to throw the ball away. I think the run game will lead the way or supplement the passing attack, but only if balance is maintained, and you've got to get the ball out quickly against those three guys. Okay,
sounds good. So there's our keys: protect Ben and run the ball. Defensively, do you want me to go?
I'm looking at the thing, and we have the same thing. You can go for it, and I'll add on. I mean,
we have to. Beaver defense has got to put some pressure on Penix, make life uncomfortable, similar to what they did to, Caleb Williams. I just think that's going to be the key. We're going to have to see some blitzing packages and really make him uncomfortable.
It's helpful for the front seven too. And well, we talk about the front seven, but at Oregon State, these blitzes come from everywhere.
Everywhere.
So I think it's helpful for the Oregon State defense that, like Kim just said, Michael Penix is not a mobile guy. He's more of a prototypical pocket passer. I looked at his rushing numbers; they're like right around 0 yards. So, he's not necessarily going to take 20-yard sacks. But he's not the Caleb Williams type where you really have to worry about pressuring and containing, or like a Cam Rising type too. He's more of a guy that you can send the house and assume he's not going to try to make plays with his legs. I think Oregon State's secondary matches up really well against that receiving core, against the passing game, and should be able to somewhat neutralize Washington's receivers. But that's only half the battle. Because if Penix has all day to throw, eventually somebody's going to get open. And we've seen that in years past at Oregon State. Solid secondaries get overdone by the lack of a pass rush. And so, run the same scheme you did against USC, run a similar scheme as against Washington State, Fresno State.
Yeah.
All of these games where Oregon State has generated pressure. And I think the fact that they don't have to worry about containing as much really opens up some of that defensive playbook for Trent Bragg. All right, those are our keys to the game. So we'll run it back here. Angie says to run the ball and to do it with success. I say protect the pocket, and then defensively, we both agree it's going to come down to pressuring Michael Penix Jr. to try to uproot that rhythm that he gets into in one of the nation's best passing offenses.
You want to hear it too, Sac City. We need a song for Sac City.
We could do a Sac City drop. I can make something happen there.
Okay. Just because I've said it now like 3 weeks and the Beavers have won, so we got to just stay consistent there.
This is, pocket pressure is kind of your hallmark of the keys to the game segment. All right, we'll leave with a look around the Pac-12. Oregon State and Washington get things started on Friday in the conference. We're past the bye week portion of the season. Oregon State and Washington closed that out last week with their byes. Everyone will play every week the rest of the way now, I believe. I don't think anybody has any like week 11 byes in this conference. So Oregon State, I pulled these lines from Caesar Sportsbook last night. Oregon State, a 4.5-point dog at the Dogs, 7:30 p.m. Friday on ESPN2, and then the Saturday slate.
Okay.
Do you want to pick Oregon State, Washington against the spread?
Oregon State.
All right.
I'll take Oregon State in the points.
Yeah, I don't think this is determined by more than a field goal either way.
No, but I actually think Oregon State wins outright.
Yeah, I see like a 24-21, 27-24, kind of grind it out type game. You
have the Beavs winning?
I don't know. I keep going back and forth. I haven't made my pick for BeaverBlitz staff picks yet. I'll tell you what, it's probably going to be a field goal either way. It's just going to be we'll see what happens when I start typing. Stream of consciousness type pick this week, I think. Okay.
Oregon's 31.5-point favorites over Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's about what Oregon State was.
Yeah, I think Oregon could win this game by 50.
Okay.
Or 60.
Washington.
I don't think Colorado's scoring against them. I really don't. And I think Oregon can rack up 50
they
plus.
can rack up points. And they will, because why not?
Yeah,
Washington State.
That's a 12:30 p.m. game on ESPN, by the way. The window that Oregon State is like dying to get into, and
there's two of them this week.
At some point, get into it. There's two 12:30 games this week, Oregon and Washington State. The headlines.
How did Oregon Colorado get the 12:30 kick on ESPN?
Right. Yeah, I mean it's going to be a 50-point game. Like, I don't understand that.
Okay, Washington State is a 4.5-point favorite at Stanford. Another 12:30 game on Pac-12 net. What do you got there?
Yeah, Washington State should cover this pretty healthily, I think. Stanford has played a little bit better in the recent weeks, but man, Washington State's a better team than their 4-4 record suggests. That's for sure.
How about Arizona? 17.5-point dogs at Utah.
Feels about right. Arizona's going to score some points. Utah's defense isn't as good as it has been. the last couple of years. We've seen that play out this year. Utah's still a much better team, but yeah, it feels like the first team to 35 is probably going to win, and I think Utah will get there much before Arizona. But the Wildcat, don't sleep on that Wildcats offense, though.
Yeah, they're and that's a 4:30.
They can score some points.
4:30 Pac-12 net kick. Okay, I still think the Oregon State Washington game is kind of the Pac-12 game of the week. But UCLA is a 10.5-point favorite at ASU, 7:30 on ESPN. What are your thoughts there?
Well, the Bruins should roll. This is a Pac-12 after dark spot against an Arizona State team that has done some stuff. I mean, they beat Washington. They've taken some teams down into the fourth quarter, and so maybe we see this thing go a little sideways, get a little crazy at the end. But UCLA should win by more than 10.5 against an Arizona State team that I don't even really know what they're playing for at this point. So.
And then last, another 7:30 FS1. Excuse me. Cal is a 21.5-point dog at USC.
Feels right. Feels like the right number to me. USC has a chance to. Well, USC has to win out in order to probably make the Pac-12 title game and potentially make the playoff. I think USC Oregon would be such an incredible Pac-12 title game. The winner's probably going to the playoff at that point.
Yeah.
Unless it's Oregon, that loss against Georgia, that could hold them back. But if USC wins out, I think the Trojans will go to the playoffs. So every game is big for USC at this point in the season.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have. We've gone overtime as I expected we would. It's been a busy week. We've had a lot to talk about over the span of 4 days, and we've got a game tomorrow on Friday. I got to hustle up to Seattle, and we'll get to Husky Stadium tomorrow evening for. Again, it's a huge game for Oregon State. It's late in the season. It feels so good to say that we're watching meaningful football and covering meaningful games this late in the year. Angie, I know you're looking forward to it. And we'll come back at some point this weekend, probably Sunday afternoon / evening. I mean, we do have an extra day to recap this thing, but I think the podcast will probably stay on Sunday this week, unless you say otherwise.
Okay, well, we'll figure it out. Somebody has to drive home from Seattle.
Yeah. and hopefully not in the rain.
And hopefully not in the rain.
I'm sure it will, but that's what you expect in the Pacific Northwest in November. Right. So,
right.
All right. Well, we will probably be back on Sunday unless something changes. Expect a Sunday at 5 type thing like we normally do. Until then, you can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns, and feel free to follow at Kim Grinolds as well. Head over to dogman.com to check out the Washington perspective on this game. We will be back on Sunday for another episode of the Damn Podcast.